Welcome to Palabra Week 2, Hispanic Heritage Month. We're focusing on music this week. Hashtag the last word. We start a little bit late because of technical difficulties, so I'm just going to bring everyone in because people are just chomping at the bit to start talking about today's topic, which is Bad Bunny. So bring all the guests in. I want each one of you to introduce yourself. I'll start first with Stefanie. Stefanie, say hello to everyone.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stefanie Fernandez. I'm a Cuban-American journalist in Washington, D.C. from Miami. Great to be here.
Very good. Suzy, jump back in. All right, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Suzy Exposito. I'm a Cuban Belizean journalist. I am a Latin music editor at Rolling Stone, where I have been working full-time since 2015.
And Eduardo, bring it home. Say hi to everyone.
Hi, I'm Eduardo Rios Pulgar. My byline is ER Pulgar, 2 last names. I'm a Venezuelan American journalist, also from Miami, based in New York City, and I'm Lady Gunn's features editor.
Very nice. Well, thank you guys. We wanted, with 2020 being such a year, we wanted to put a little joy. So what better joy than having 3 amazing music journalists who have written about the greatest cultural global sensation of 2020. Fellow, I'm the only Puerto Rican on the panel, so big props for Bad Bunny for making it cool to be a Puerto Rican and have a Puerto Rican accent. Thank you. I want each of you to talk about what you've written and talking about. So let's start with you, Stefanie, about what you've written about Bad Bunny and why he is such a cultural phenomenon.
Absolutely. Well, I interviewed Benito back in end of February, it seems, right before all of this madness started with the pandemic, before lockdown and everything started. And my article published in Pitchfork early March, I want to say. I think it was 305 Day. That's why I remember it was March 5th. I know that I'd been working with Pitchfork for the last year as a freelancer, and they had been in talks with Bad Bunny's people for a long time on possibly getting some kind of coverage at Pitchfork, and then it finally came together in March with this profile that we were able to do. I think there's so many reasons that Benito is a cultural icon and someone that we're looking to a lot these days. He very presciently released the soundtrack of the pandemic for a lot of people, a lot of what came to be the songs of the summer in social isolation. I want to get to everyone else, but I think what I tried to focus on in my profile of Benito was kind of having not seen a lot of postmortems or reflections from him on his involvement in last summer's protests in Puerto Rico, which he was heavily involved in, the Riqui Renuncia movement. I really wanted to revisit that moment from him as a Puerto Rican who had been so heavily involved, and I hadn't heard a lot from him since that moment publicly, as well as just kind of exploring, his personality. I think something that a lot of people who've interviewed him have noticed is that, he's quite shyer in person. He's more introverted and quite different from the kind of bombastic and loud persona that he presents in his music into the world. So I was really interested in exploring kind of how he feels about fame right now, which I think a theme in a lot of profiles of him has been, of course, complicated, dealing with the pressures of, being at the level that he is as a musician, as this representative of Puerto Rico, a title that was bestowed upon him that he doesn't always want. As well as, I think a lot of the themes I was trying to explore, were coming out a lot later in terms of his response to the Black Lives Matter movement in the United States, or late response or lack of a response.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're going to get into all that. I just want to so Suzy, come on the cover of Rolling Stone. Damn. Talk to me about that cover story. I mean, come on. It's like, anyway, growing up with Rolling Stone, that, congratulations. But tell me about that piece, which I've read all everyone's work, but wow. So tell me about your piece.
Thank you. That was my first cover story. I also interviewed, I actually profiled Bad Bunny twice. The first time I did it was 2018, right before Por Siempre came out. And then I interviewed him again during the pandemic for the June cover story for Rolling Stone. Initially, my story is pretty wild. It transformed a couple times. So like the way that I made it happen, I mean, it took me like over a year to convince my bosses to put Bad Bunny on the cover. Like, I'm not gonna lie about that. It took like a year and a half, really.
Wow. Not surprised, but continue.
I mean, look, like Rolling Stone had never put someone on the cover who didn't speak English. They'd never done that before. And so, you know, there were obvious difficulties with that. I mean, I had never written a cover story before. So, you know, the conversation was kind of like, you know, can she do this? Well, I did it. I did it. And it was very tricky because it was right before the pandemic really took off in the US. I had Bad Bunny visit the Rolling Stone office to play some of his songs. That's when I saw La Stefanie. La Stefanie. Yeah, but like that's when I saw her when she was shadowing Bad Bunny, you know. And I was scheming. I was like, I want to bring him to the office and play his music really loud in like the conference room. And, you know, I just kind of watched as people just kept piling into the conference room once they realized that he was in the office.
Yeah.
And it honestly felt like that moment in Selena where she goes to the department store and the lady's like, those dresses are really expensive. And then, you know, people outside notice that Selena's in the department store and they're flocking. And it was a lot like that.
Wow.
At my office, just people seeing him through like the window and being like, ah, like gradually until maybe about like 50 people filed into the conference room. And so he was playing some songs from Yo Hago Lo Que Me Da La Gana. And after my bosses saw this, they were like, you know what, we have no choice but to stand. So
there you go. That's awesome. That's awesome, Suzy.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Eduardo also was working on the Playboy story at the same time.
That's right. Like, that's what I was like, this is where I'm like, and then there's a Playboy story. I mean, it's like, sure. So Eduardo, tell me about your work. I mean, first of all, again, the three of you, I love all the pieces and we can dissect them all we want, but you guys need to step up and be proud of the work that you did. And Eduardo, take it away. Your turn.
Oh, you're so sweet for celebrating all of us. As Suzy said, I mean, it was funny because I've been reading Suzy's work since I was like a baby journalist, which I still think I kind of am. And we started like kind of becoming quarantine buddies because we were both in the very specific instance of working on this piece at the same time. And the way that my piece came about was a Cinderella story type situation. I was full-time freelancing for mad different places. I was working at this PR firm and I get an email completely out of the blue by this Playboy editor who read a personal essay I wrote about Bad Bunny and my sister's illness.
Which is a great one, which needs to be read too. That's the one on me that we should shout. That's how I found out about, I read that before the Playboy piece, so continue.
Oh, yeah, that was for Level and that was a really emotional one. And the editor found me through that. Emailed me and then she was like, oh, like March 1st, come to Miami, interview Bad Bunny. And March 1st is my birthday. So that was a very good birthday. and then I spent the whole pandemic pretty much just carving that out up until the last minute. I didn't know it was going to be a cover until it was a cover.
So obviously there's a lot to dissect about what Benito means, but I would be remiss to not talk about the concert that happened that seemed to take over the internet and WhatsApp. I mean, you know, I have like 3 or 4 WhatsApp Puerto Rican groups and I was like, I had to turn them off because I was like, I get it. He's in New York. I got it. Eduardo, you have a story because we were doing pre-work. You need to share this story about the concert because I thought it was fantastic. So you start with that.
Well, me and Suzy both have the story because I was literally hanging out with her right before. Like, we were chilling in the park, reading each other's tarot cards, like minding our business. And then I'm on the Uptown train home to Harlem. And as Suzy, like, I had completely forgotten the concert was happening. And then she texts me, she's like, yo, like, Bad Bunny's in the Bronx. I'm like, he's where? And I found myself running after that bus and front row for Yo Perreo Sola and losing my fucking mind. And that was my first post-quarantine show.
Wow. Suzy, Stefanie, when you guys heard about the concert, what were your thoughts? I mean, Suzy, what tarot cards were you reading? I mean, this is interesting already.
What did I say? I don't want to call Eduardo out because tarot is so personal, but I had to rush back home. I like rushed back home to watch the concert on TV. And so, but I was so mad when I found out that he was in New York, because I would have been on that train with Eduardo if I had known that he was going to be uptown, because I mean, they kept it airtight. Like, Bad Bunny's team, Univision, they didn't tell anybody where Bad Bunny was going to be, but that's just kind of, honestly, Bad Bunny is like a performance artist. He's like on like some Fluxus shit, like sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on here.
You already did. It's all good. You're with me. I'm totally, like, we're journalists. If journalists aren't cursing, I mean, we're not journalists. Continue.
But no. I mean, Bad Bunny, he's on some freaking, like, honestly, like 60s performance artist stuff, because he just like shows up places. He loves doing this. Like Yo hago lo que me da la gana. That was on Leap Day. He like released it on Leap Day. So like, we're not going to be able to technically celebrate the anniversary for like 4 years. He just trolls like that, So but I think that's part of his allure. That's part of what makes him such an exciting artist, is I think that he's very much on the pulse of like what is happening in culture. I think that, and we can get to this later, there are times when I think there are certain things that he has more difficulties like around.
That's tough. Yeah, we want to get into all that, but I want to get Stefanie's thoughts on the concert and what you think.
I very little to add there. I was in my living room in DC, feeling FOMO for New York and wishing I could chase that bus, but also feeling kind of the social anxiety of seeing so many people and Benito dodging the traffic lights, and but I loved it.
My favorite is the Dominican uncle who was like, "Que esto?" Like, and he's about to do last. There's a great video on Twitter. It's like when La Romana started. Yeah, that was perfect. It was like every Dominican uncle is right here. So listen, Suzy, you brought it up, and I think given the moment, actually a week like this week, I mean, a day after Breonna Taylor, you can't talk about music and culture without what's going on with the moment. Yeah. And I think each one of you like have brought this up a little bit when it comes to Bad Bunny. Like, yeah, sure, he was out there with Ricky Renuncia in 2019, but I think there's more complexities when it comes to Black Lives Matter. You guys want to unpack that a little bit? You want to start first, Suzy, and then you all can jump in about sort of maybe not accepting the moment fully or trying to figure it out. I mean, what are your thoughts?
I will say I knew that, so after the Rolling Stone story published, that was like on May 14th, 15th. After that, Bad Bunny took like an internet detox indefinitely. He was like, I'm leaving the internet, bye. And was pretty like unreachable. Like, I mean, not even his publicist could reach him. Like, he wanted to be off the grid for a while because, I mean, he got pretty exposed. Like, after, I don't know, I might do the same thing. If someone did like a cover story about me, I would also probably disappear. But yeah.
Especially the Rolling Stone cover. I mean, it's a cover. I mean, you guys have weight, and then, continue.
We get pretty intimate in our stories, so there were things that he discussed in our interviews that he hadn't discussed before in public. And so, I mean, whether it was like gender, like matters of how he felt about gender and like how he felt about politics, like he was very explicit about that. I feel like the race question is very difficult for, like, I mean, I'll just say it, like, those of us who are mestizo, like, it just, like, I think that our generation is really trying to detangle a lot of, you know, toxic perceptions of race, and like, especially given that, you know, America, the United States was like established with a very specific project in mind, and that was the project of like European white supremacy. So that, I mean, that's my take. They came here, they colonized, and now, you know, hundreds of years later, we're left to pick up the pieces. You know, I mean, all of Latin America was colonized. And so we have this difficult task, like, you know, those of us, I mean, I was born in the US, and I understand that my understanding of like race and ethnicity is going to be different than someone from Mexico or like Venezuela or Cuba. Like, it's going to be a little bit different. But something that a lot of people have difficulty discussing is like their role in specifically like fostering anti-Blackness, how we talk about like just how we talk about ourselves in relation to Blackness and in relation to whiteness. There are many people in Latin America, you know, like they don't experience like racism until they come to the US, or until they come to like the United States. And we know that it manifests everywhere. Like, we know that Latin America is by no means an exception, that racism happens there. But what's been difficult, and I think that, you know, I can say as someone who's interviewed a lot of reggaeton artists, like it's a difficult concept to, you know, like even people from Puerto Rico, they come to the US and they're just like,
yeah, you know, I think there's a lot to be said. One of the, I celebrate San Benito for a lot of reasons, because his Puerto Ricanness, it's always been looked down. You know, we've always been looked down, the way we talk, the way we act. And you hear his language and I'm like, holy shit, like this is the language of where I grew up. And I got like white Anglos dancing to it at a club pre-pandemic. I'm okay. But I do think, right, so it's like, okay, that's cool. Like my accent is cool. But I think the notion of, because now you've become mainstream, Stefanie, Eduardo, jump in. It's like, there is this expectation where you see someone who is a whiter Puerto Rican sort of appropriating, you know, an Afro, you know, it has Afro roots, reggaeton. And so there, it gets very complex. And do you think someone like him as an artist is beginning to understand that, because he's come out of the reggaeton, you know what I mean? Now he's global, right? Now he has to speak to global movements. Eduardo, Stefanie, jump in.
I definitely, there's something that I really want to add to that. So the day that I was on set with Beno and like all the Playboy team, I was also shooting, they were doing like one of those like video, like social content pieces, and I was going to interview him, and, you know, with like the cute edits and like and one of the questions they wanted me to ask him, and they ran all of them by me, thank God. They were like, oh, like, it was one of those, like, what's it like to be like a brown man in the industry? And I had to look this woman in the eye and be like, Bad Bunny is a white man. And she was like, but he's Latino. And I was like, and, you know, then you think about, you know, being a Latino in the US, like here, just by the very virtue of not being Anglo-Saxon, it's like, you know, Latino equals person of color, which, as all of us on this panel can embody and attest to, is not the case by any means. So Benito, you know, definitely, you know, by taking that detox at the worst possible time, there was like mad controversy of like, oh, like this man like appropriating reggaeton, not acknowledging the Black roots. And then he comes out with that poem, which I also, you know, I don't know if it was the best idea to put it on like Time Magazine. In my personal opinion, that should have been like, you know, a tweet, like a little thing. But he also, you know, to go back to what you were saying about like him learning, he just dropped a fucking fire track called Compositor del Año, where he like faces all these things very much head on. I think he like, you know, explicitly says Black Lives Matter, like he does in the poem, but this is, you know, him dropping a bar, commenting on all these things. And although I don't think that we should be looking to like a celebrity to like comment on all these things, his particular place and his particular platform, it's important that he say these things, and I'm glad that he's at least learning and acknowledging it.
Yeah, I think that's a really the way you frame it. Stefanie, what about you? I mean, obviously it just is in your face. You know what I mean? You have to address it. I mean, we know he is a global icon, but then 2020 shows up.
Yeah, I think one idea that became very salient to me when he released Yo hago lo que me da la gana, what was his project with that album. And I remember him telling me in our interview, he said, el reggaeton se ha perdido un poco, like it's lost itself, And I think that's something a lot of us who are writing about reggaeton feel and who listen to it. Reggaeton now, pop reggaeton, is being made by, non-Caribbean white Latin artists who are dominating what the world thinks of reggaeton. And Bad Bunny knows as much. He said as much in terms of his project with this album, and what that meant was returning reggaeton to its roots, to its Black roots in Puerto Rico and in Panama previously, in highlighting these icons of the genre that were from a time when reggaeton had this history of being criminalized for along class and racial lines.
Yeah, La Mano Dura, it's Rosselló's dad in the 90s.
Well, there you go.
It was coming out, and there was this sort of everything. You were a drug deal. Anyone who listened to it I remember I grew up during that time, so I didn't want to cut you off, Stefanie, but you're absolutely right.
No, that's absolutely true. And, trap and Espanol as well. These are both genres that were born of Black Caribbean artistry. And Benito, as much as he acknowledges that he's returning it to its roots, there also has to be that acknowledgement of profiting off of Black art. And I agree that, he's learning. I think this has really illustrated the problem of celebrity in movements like this, and really determining who's going to lead us in this moment. It's not Bad Bunny. And he receives plenty of celebration otherwise. So I don't think it's inappropriate to call this out when it happens, the best of intentions. But I think, especially, with an album like this that is dominated, it's very important.
Let's talk about that, because I think, like I said, I started this conversation with 2020 can get canceled, and then he comes, and man, I'm a late convert to La Religión, because I'm a 50 something who, it took me a while, but one of the things that drew me into him was saying it's just reggaeton is very simple from a music perspective, and I think he has an appeal that goes into hip hop, alt, rock, like there's just something there. So talk to me about that joy of the summer. Why musically has it really just punched, Eduardo, let's start with you. Why has it really appealed with people? Is it because of the time? The last couple of albums have just been spectacular.
Well, I would say that it's a combination of things. And it's one that we can clearly see in Benito specifically, who is very much steeped in this very good base that he has with like reggaetoneros from like back in the day. Like I think a lot about, the way that Zafaera very much like channels like an old Marquesina, the fact that Joel and Randy are on it, the fact that like he very much, like he was that like shy kid who was like listening to all of this and is like, I want to do that. Like he did his homework and then he started making music. And that, alongside the fact that, that the Yankees been building this base for a while in the US. Like reggaeton has been like, I think for all four of us, like, we grew up on reggaeton, but like you were saying, I don't know if we were already streaming or not, like when you were talking about your neighbors like complaining about Calle Tres, and then suddenly, oh, this like Bunny guy is like fun. Like he came at the perfect time for the Bunny to be fun, but like he comes on a good base, and I think he does a good job of honoring that. And it was all like a right time, right place moment.
Yeah.
And, the fact that he's also dope and very strange and incorporates like,
and proudly Puerto Rican, which I think is another thing that, to me, he's become a political symbol to Puerto Ricans, like, who are like, what, I got to give you props because you are leading with your Boricuaness at the same time. And I'm all for people who just like wear it on their sleeve. Mm-hmm. Stefanie, what about you? What has this summer been in terms of this joy, given we want to
Yeah.
cancel 2020, but we got Bunny, so maybe not.
I think the thing I've observed so much, for those of us privileged enough to be home, to work from home, and the privilege to feel bored in the pandemic, I think one thing I've noticed is this nostalgia and this regression to the things that brought us comfort in simpler times. I've been listening to a lot of pop punk, and I think what this album kind of presaged was this like nostalgic moment. Like he has such reverence for this era of early reggaeton and his childhood in Puerto Rico, and you can feel that there's this sense that he's losing that magic a little bit in his current day of celebrity. I will say, like, one of the last moments of just pure unadulterated joy I felt this year was at the Rolling Stone office, hearing Hablamos Mañana for the first time, blasting over those speakers. Suzy, as a fellow Latino, can attest that was just like such a special moment to hear, just like this incredibly artistic transformation that is just so difficult to categorize by genre. I was in my whirlwind 24 hours in New York with all of my bags on my back before I had to catch my train back to DC. It was just such a special moment to hear that for the first time.
Suzy, what about you?
I was freaking out when he put that in the office, and everyone was like cracking up at me because I was literally losing it. Like like a Latin trap screamo song. Like, sign me up.
You're like, check. Here we go.
All of them. But yeah, I think that it was nice. I think like I had such an intense pandemic, like the first 3 months, because I was actually on my way to Puerto Rico in March, and I stopped in Miami to interview Tiny, the producer. And, Tiny walked me through all the songs that he produced, and that was one of them. And he was just like, yeah, me and Benito, we like sat around and we're talking about what we used to listen to back in like the 2000s, because that's really what, that's what Yo Hago is. It's like a journey to the 2000s, and specifically Bad Bunny's 2000s in Puerto Rico. And that didn't exclude, like they were listening to Linkin Park, they were listening to Limp Bizkit and stuff like that. So like when they were talking about what to do with Hablamos Mañana, like they were basically like, how do we mix that with like what we do now? And it was genius. And I had a few Zoom conversations with Bad Bunny at some point, and I was staying at my abuela's apartment in Miami Beach. And for 3 months, like I really thought I was going to be there for like 2 weeks. I was like, oh no, this is going to be like swine flu. It's going to be gone like this, and next thing you know, like I mean, we pushed back the Bad Bunny cover by a couple of months. And it just became apparent that I just have to report this thing from Abuela's house in Miami. And so it took, we spoke over Zoom, and I think that one of the, I love getting the like over the top Bad Bunny, like on his record. That's like, it was like Stefanie said, like he's just so bombastic as a performer, but as a human, he's a very, very sensitive guy. And it felt really special to me, not getting the typical, because Bad Bunny typically, he doesn't like doing interviews for longer than like 30 minutes. He just kind of taps out. Mm-hmm. But we stayed on Zoom. I mean, our second Zoom call, we were talking about Yo Pereo Sola, and we were talking about gender. We were on that call for like 3 hours, like
wow.
About his ideas on gender, but also like how he's trying to reconcile like the celebrity with this obligation he feels towards his fellow Puerto Ricans, and he's trying to use it the best way that he can. And I think, and he's still learning in the process. I think it's really important that we don't look to celebrities as like de facto leaders of movements. While there are some, like No Name right now, the rapper, like I love what she's doing. She's really prioritizing education. I feel like she's definitely like a leader type. Like she just kind of took to that very organically. But I do think it's really important that we don't project that onto artists, because it's just like, you know, not everybody is an organizer. Like I used to be an organizer, and I was like, I don't want this to be my life anymore. I'm tired. You know,
I did get exhausted. So yeah, you mentioned gender. I wanted to see what Eduardo and Stefanie, what your thoughts on sort of how Benito has sort of begun to directly challenge and try to dismantle, you know, hundreds of years of patriarchy in Latin America. I mean, I don't know how else to say it, but Eduardo, you want to jump in and how does reggaeton, you know, and actually going against something like reggaeton, which is, you know,
I mean, honestly,
flies in the face.
Honestly, tall ass order to ask of a cis straight.
Right. Yep. I'm with you.
Although Beno is, I think, wonderful about just like marring and murking like those possibilities. Like he's like, I'm gonna go up there in full drag and I'm gonna spit these fucking bars and you're not gonna question how fucking hard I go. And that's not something that, I mean, I think Suzy like phrased this like so wonderfully in her Rolling Stone piece, but like, you know, when you think about like that in reggaeton 5 years ago, in, you know, in that gigantic umbrella term that I hate of Latin music, just cross genre, impossible. Like Ricky Martin was absolutely martirizado when he like came out, and like that shit was so difficult. So, you know, for Benito to do that and then to be like, okay, but like I'm straight and all of you can call me whatever the fuck you want, but I'm gonna do lo que me da la gana. Like that shit is powerful. Like it's a very evolved, I don't know if evolved is the word or progressive is the word. I hate that word too. But like he's like, you know,
well, it's right. I mean, he's put a stake in the ground. He's like, this is my stand.
Yeah, and he's also, you know, he's giving credit to like the people that actually had to suffer through these marginalizations. Like, you know, I mean, you know, there was all that controversy about like, oh, like you're centering yourself in the conversation. Why not give this to an actual trans woman? And then, you know, you think about his team, which like has like three people. Like he has his like, he's taking notes. Like, and you know, going back to like what I was saying about him taking notes in the past, like this man is doing his homework.
Yeah, and he's also young. I mean, I'm like,
baby.
You know, he's still a baby. Yeah. I mean, Stefanie, any final thoughts before we start wrapping it up about all what we were talking about there?
Yeah, you know, I think we need 3 more Zoom calls to to break down.
You know, it's like, I think there's a part 2. So I'm making the pitch to palabra. It's like, bring us back. But there you go. I've done it.
The entirety of, you know, Benito's gender performance throughout his career, I think, is an incredibly fascinating topic that I hope through the coming years he'll experiment with more and play with more. What I will say that I loved about the Yo Perreo Sola video, keeping in mind that, you know, Nessie, the featured artist on the track, was not given credit on the track. You know, regardless of what his intentions might have been, I think that read in general as you know, an oversight, a pretty big oversight. Regarding the video though specifically, I think what meant the most to me, I think there's a lot you can go back and forth on, you know, what is enough coming from Benito, what is, what it will mean in the long term, you know, in terms of how we perceive gender in popular Latin music, another term that I also hate. But I think what that video showed to me was, I think, a really powerful desire to show, you know, the most machista of his fans, the most machista listeners in Latin America, that, you know, this artist, one of the biggest in the world, is not going to allow you to be comfortable with how you perceive the role of gender in this genre, and how this extremely visible, incredibly admired by men figure is performing gender. I thought that was the most powerful statement to me.
Yeah,
a lot we could talk about.
Yeah, I know we can break this down, but I just want to thank the 3 of you guys. I want to continue this conversation somehow. If it's not here, I want to bring you guys back with me at some point. But Stefanie Fernandez, Suzy Exposito, and Eduardo Rios Pulgar, thank you guys so much for sharing your thoughts. Also, keep writing. You guys are all just stellar music journalists, American music journalists who have brought such a diversity to the industry. And it's just exciting. I'm a music nerd, and like to see, I mean, I wanted this to happen like 30 years ago, and to see you guys doing this for amazing publications gives me hope in 2020. So thank you guys so much again for being on.
Thank you, Julio.
Thank you for having us.
I'll see Stefanie Eduardo. I'll see you at emo night.
Emo night. I want in, you know, I want in. Come on.
Julio.
Yeah, so hey, the next palabra, they're going to continue to talk about music. Follow NAHJ Palabra NAHJ for more of these. Thank you guys so much for watching. Julio Ricardo Varela, founder of Latino Rebels. Just follow these wonderful voices and keep the conversation going. Thanks again for being on.